The SS Richard Montgomery is an American liberty ship that served in the Second World War, but she somehow sank in the Thames, right outside London, in 1944. Today, over 80 years later, Britain's coastguard and navy are still paying to employ people to guard her shipwreck 24/7 because they know how high the stakes are. Anybody sailing too close must be intercepted because touching it could trigger an earthquake that caused billions of dollars of damage. At least that's according to a report quoted in Parliament in April 2026, saying, "The SS Richard Montgomery could cause the largest peacetime non-nuclear explosion in world history, throwing a plume of water 3,000 meters into the sky, setting off a tsunami that would obliterate the Kent and Essex coastlines, and shooting all the way up to London to flood the Palace of Westminster." Let's look at the 6 key pieces of this puzzle that will tell us whether this nightmare scenario is an exaggeration or maybe it's not. Starting with the insane way that she sank, which her shipbuilders could never foresee when they lay her down in Florida in March 1943. She's a new type of cargo ship that's optimized to be assembled in days rather than months. With these simple, standardized builds, the Allies can replace their ships quicker than German U-boats can sink them, although hindsight might be about to show that innovations like that do tend to come with some trade-offs. In her first year, the Montgomery successfully makes several transatlantic runs, enabling the build-up of troops and materials in Britain for the D-Day landings. But in August 1944, she's loaded up in Philadelphia for what will be her final journey. She sets off in a convoy of over 100 ships and their escorts, with around 80 souls on board and 5 cargo holds of munitions. Now, the exact type and number of these munitions that she even set off with on that day, let alone how it affects today's current mess, is a subject of some debate and conspiracy, as we'll see in a second, but it's definitely in the thousands of tons of high explosives and their fuses. They successfully make the journey across to the UK, and the ship pulls in towards London's ports, coming under the authority of the harbour master in Southend. He orders her to anchor at a specific berth off the sands of Sheerness. But there's a problem. At low tide, that berth is only 7 meters deep, and the Montgomery has a draft of 9 meters. The American sailors, of course, can't be expected to realise how shallow every little sandbank in Britain is, but there are British boats nearby who are watching this disaster unfold in real time and sounding their sirens to warn the Montgomery. But she goes for it and runs aground, fracturing the ship right in the middle. Not the best advert for these quickly welded hulls, but so far, not a crisis. Nobody realises yet that 80 years later, this is still going to be causing massive headaches and expenses for the Royal Navy. All the crew do make it off with maybe wet feet, but alive. First they're wondering, why didn't the captain listen to the warning sirens? A local urban myth starts up that the captain was actually already ashore in a pub at the time of the sinking, and there is a ton of mudslinging and people losing their jobs, each country blaming the other, before an inquiry finds that it was the harbour master's fault for assigning an unsuitable berth, and that the captain was actually on board, but was asleep during the crash. 2 days later, a salvage contract is assigned to remove the cargo from stern to bow, and the bravest local dock workers start on it. With crates coming out of hold 5 right in the back, the forward section is therefore the heaviest and drops down, taking on more water. This makes the fracture way worse and the salvage mission much more dangerous. With crates then coming out of hold 4, the next one forward, the tension is too much and the ship splits in half, with the 2 sides sliding further down and spinning away from each other underwater, as these later scans reveal in such a haunting way. Rescue crews are forced to officially abandon the salvage mission with apparently half of the cargo still inside, although this turns out to be really contested. The ship breaking up and finally sinking is followed by 20 years of dithering, rerouting ships around it, and generally hoping that the problem will go away, since surely underwater explosives are neutralized and can't hurt everybody, until that idea is proven wrong. massively wrong. There's a much smaller Polish ammunition ship that sank in the English Channel in 1946, sitting twice as far out from the nearest town as the Montgomery's wreck, and carrying a tiny fraction of the amount of explosives. Still, when they tried to clear this Polish wreck in 1967, they inadvertently detonated the remaining cargo. The resulting explosion registered a 4.5 on the Richter scale, the thing that we normally use to measure earthquakes. Chimneys, roofs, and windows in the town of Folkestone were damaged, and a 50-meter long crater was blown in the sea floor. The PR around this job was awful, so think about the Montgomery. She's not just closer to any land, she's closer to one of the UK's main liquid natural gas import facilities and crude oil storage tanks, and the UK's main shipping routes that the entire economy depends on, and of course she's much closer to towns with tens of thousands of people living in them. The second and third order impacts of this destruction and flooding and evacuation are estimated in various billion-dollar amounts, so you can see why you'd think twice about touching the Montgomery, particularly because of the sensitive nature of the explosives in the half that fell away. Even before we argue about precisely how much is left down there, we know that the frag and cluster munitions in the forward holds were shipped with their fuses pre-installed. These fuses contain a lead compound that can react in water to form a new, extremely sensitive explosive that would be triggered by the slightest friction or movement or physical impact, which is a real shame because there's one physical impact that is for sure coming very soon. In 1998, the government claimed that all these dangerous chemicals have surely been submerged for so long now and washed away that it's not actually as dangerous as people think, triggering a back and forth with publications that actually understand how chemistry works, like New Scientist, who said in 2004 that for 60 years the people of Sheerness in the UK have been living next to a time bomb. If the cargo explodes, the blast will bring death and destruction to a wide area. The UK government, though, has always played down the risk, which you could argue is pretty damning. The wreck, as also revealed in the House of Commons in April 2026, is still under 24/7 guard. Anybody going too near must be intercepted, there's a no-fly zone including for drones around it, and the wreckage itself is constantly monitored and rescanned using sonar to track the hull's decay. This work is all carried out by the Coast Guard, the Royal Navy, and experts from the MOD, who all deserve our great respect for their skilled and dangerous work, along with certain private firms. Many contracts have been offered over the years for marking and guarding the SS Richard Montgomery, like this one for £200,000 a year, a few others at around £100,000 a year. There's a few like this one, £1 million for a new scan. That's before even getting into all the escort vessels and crews that it takes to pilot dangerous ships, like for example liquid natural gas supertankers, safely around the wreck. But you get the point. It's money well spent in an effort to avoid our collective doom, but it shows that even leaving everything down there and hoping for the best is expensive. But here's the thing. Even that option won't exist for much longer. In 2018, after one of these scans, the marine authorities reported that the wreck's masts pose an impending danger. They are collapsing under their own weight and will fall into the cargo, potentially triggering the explosion that we're all fearing. And there the actual problems start, because this knowledge has to be acted upon by the UK government. On the one hand, this mess still being unresolved is an insane national embarrassment, especially since areas on land are repeatedly closed whenever one piece of unexploded ordnance weighing a fraction of a ton is dug up, and you're really going to let thousands of tons sit in your busiest waterway for over 80 years. Many commentators have also pointed out that every new Prime Minister knows that they will get there 5 years, or however long, and they just kick the tidal wave can down the road because, fingers crossed, it happens to go off under the next guy. And when it does, they'll all line up and go, "Tut tut, how clumsy of you to let that happen on your watch." Until 2018, when we learned that the masts are too dangerous to leave. But even then, it wasn't until 2026 that this contract was finally given out to safely remove them, for which an American firm will be paid around $13 million. That's not to remove the explosives, just the masts, and even that took 8 years to assign to somebody. But on the other hand, the Royal Navy has already said that any attempt to actually remove the cargo will have to be done by their skilled engineers, who are brave enough to go and risk their lives down there for our sake if it comes to it. So maybe we shouldn't complain too much. And given other situations that have gone wrong before, it's very easy to understand not wanting to give that particular order right now if you don't think that you have to. Like, maybe if you believe the story that there isn't so much explosive material down there as everybody has feared, because there are a ton of numbers flying around, fueling endless debates and conspiracies. We know that she was carrying high explosives and their fuses, frags, cluster munitions, pyrotechnics, white phosphorus, and all kinds of dangerous stuff, but nobody agrees on how much. Even her load when leaving the US, was it 5, 6, or 7,000 tons? And if so, is that thousands of tons of mixed explosives, or was it converted to TNT equivalents already? Is that all measured with or without the weight of the casings? And then you have to ask the same questions about exactly how much was safely salvaged. Various agencies, politicians, and researchers have all claimed different numbers in their reports, partly to serve different agendas. But it was rightly pointed out in the House of Lords in 2019 that if the government wants to downplay the panic and tell local people that there's less explosives left in there than once reported, then that can only mean one of two things. Either the authorities are inaccurate when they record such crucial data as how many tons of deadly explosives are trapped inside a wreck near the beaches where their children play, or that over time some of those deadly explosives have drifted out of that wreck into the wider area completely unmapped, waiting to wash up on the beaches where their children play. In neither case is that actually helping with the panic, and the local people deserve a real answer, while we all wait and hope for a successful operation on the masts. But until such a time, depending on whose numbers you're using, you can convincingly argue anywhere on the scale from a bit of chop and a few broken dinner plates in Sheerness, all the way up to the local MP's headline-grabbing fears of a liquid natural gas chain reaction tidal wave that reaches central London.